Welcome to the 23 Mile Podcast. I'm Karaday, and today I'm joined by Dhilon Solanki, a founder who has made several pivots over the past 20 years of his career. Today, he's CEO of Story Locker, the personal broadcasting company recently named to the Startups 100. Before founding his current startup, he had conquered the hospitality industry. Beginning his career in the late night and restaurant industry, he went on to lead marketing and launched nightclubs across the UK. He then decided to build his own brand and founded Pecking, an award-winning chicken rotisserie brand. After selling that business, he launched the UK and EMEA arm of Sprout, a hospitality CRM adopted by more than 50 large food and beverage brands across the UK. His contribution led to the multi-million-dollar sale to Mr. Yum. In this episode, we'll trace his journey from the early days DJing to scaling large brands, navigating exits, and his best practices for bootstrapping companies. We'll also touch on personal losses, failures, and how all of this are shaping his journey to scaling Story Locker. Dhilon, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for that amazing introduction, Kyodi, and really appreciate you having me on the show, and I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in.
I must start by saying we got introduced by our good friend, Bodhi.
Yes, yeah, which is unbelievable, actually, in today's current world, how AI kind of navigates and creates relationships. But yeah, here we are today.
We'll touch more on, those two extremes, human connections and technology. They seem at two extreme ends, but at the end of the day, they are one and the same, and that's the business you are in now. But, let's start at the very beginning. You started off DJing. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I was at University of Kingston, doing a 4-year business studies degree. And I always used to go to the student union, and they didn't play a huge amount of great music. And I saw there was a set of 1210s Technics decks sitting there gathering dust. And I felt that I've never been on the decks before, but let me just go and have a little play. And I started having a little play in the downtime, early mornings when there was not many people in the student union. And I really kind of started to find some good rhythm. And then people started to listen to what I was doing. Say, oh, you're pretty good. And I started to able to beat match as well, which is quite nice. A good friend of mine that I ended up meeting at university was also a DJ, and he kind of helped me through the process in terms of understanding music as well. And then I kind of found my own niche, which was house and garage, the old school garage music back in the day, 10 or 15 years ago, although it is making a comeback. And then from there, I just loved doing what I was doing, playing music, started to promote my own night at Student Union every Wednesday night, and then started to promote night in Kingston City Centre as well. So it was great to put on a show for people, give people an experience. And I think that's how I kind of got into DJing, really, to be honest. And then I started to venture out and go onto pirate radio stations and started to DJ in the nightclubs in London, as well. And then birthday parties. And whenever it was a family birthday party, they'd always expect Dhilon to come in to the house or the venue and start DJing as well. So that's kind of how I got into it. But it also really helped me pay my way through university as well. University, and still is not cheap. So I found the real passion to kind of help me through university as well, rather than having to find an actual job, because it didn't feel like a job by any means.
Very interesting. And how did you manage to combine both the stresses and demands of university with DJing? How did you manage to combine both of this?
It was very much creating a balance, really. So I made sure my priority at university was to make sure that I got a good education and I came out of a good degree. So that was always my priority, and I'd never allow music or me DJing neglect or compromise me having to miss any lessons or not being able to put my assignments in or coursework or whatever the case may be. So that always came secondary. But I always made sure that I found time, because in life you've got to have a little bit of a balance. You can work all the hours, but at the same time I think you need to take some rest as well. And my version of rest was going out and playing music and enjoying myself, because I also enjoyed myself whilst I was DJing in front of crowds as well. And essentially I was DJing in front of my friends, so it almost became a hobby. So for me, it was just trying to get that balance right. But priority for me was still always to make sure that I've got a really good education on the back of it. But university was also, I think people underestimate the value, when you go to university. It's not just so much the education, it's about you as a person, in terms of how you start to become a lot more confident, come out of your shell to a certain extent, create your own personality, and how you start to really kind of fend for yourself really, and start going into the world of work, and into the world, because up until then I lived at home, with my parents. So I was kind of almost like sheltered to a certain extent, so for me, it was really a good opportunity to kind of, become me essentially.
I mean, this is interesting because I started out with my first venture while I was in college as well. I started a
Oh,
student
okay.
magazine. So here we are,
Unbelievable.
that experience of starting a business in school, having to find a balance, like you said, having, a little time to study, but trying to make the best of it. I count that experience 20 years ago as one of the most impactful in shaping my career. Do you find it's the same thing that kind of shapes your career over time?
Yeah, of course. I think there are like certain habits that you learn like early on, really, and then it's really important to kind of keep consistent with those habits as well. Again, so I really kind of carved out my week. And when you're at university, there's no like timeline as such. The only thing that you have in your calendar, in your diary, is when you have your tutorials, and when you have your seminars. But apart from that, you've got all the free time in your world. It's up to you what you do in that free time. Some people wasted that free time. Some people just sat around, and look, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I wanted to try and make sure that I can maximize that time that I had available and learn new things, and obviously work on my passion, which was DJing as well. I also loved food and drink, so I like to go out, but obviously within reason as well. So for me, like, I then started to really carve out a passion for for the hospitality industry, which is essentially what I went into when I graduated. But I think being at university and being a DJ and promoting my own, like, a really good grounding in terms of what I wanted to do later on in life. I did a business studies degree, but I wasn't quite sure in what particular facet of business I wanted to go into. But I always had a passion for business, and I had a passion for entertainment. And that's what my early part of my career led me into.
Very interesting. Do you find, so you went from DJing to working in hospitality and marketing. How
Yes.
seamless was that transition? Was it such like you were working in the space and then you got a job easily? How was that
Yes.
after you left school?
Yeah, good question. So when I graduated, I went to go work for a marketing agency, and as you can imagine, every single person who graduates is looking for a job. So
Yes.
you're going up a lot of competition, But for me, I really enjoyed marketing. I did a 1 year work experience in a marketing firm during my sandwich course as well. So for me, it was about going into a marketing agency, and I had the opportunity to go and work for a marketing agency to get a bit of like real life experience, in addition to what I'd already got in my work experience, or in my sandwich course as well. But my passion was always hospitality early on, but jobs are very far and few between. But what I did, I took the first step, went to go and work for a marketing agency. And what I did to kind of really like stand out from the crowd is that I created a direct mail about promoting myself, and I sent it to 50 different agencies, and I got 7 or 8 replies back, had 3 interviews, and I got offered 2 jobs, which is fantastic. So I think almost, you have to think outside the box a little bit, push the boundaries, try and differentiate to everyone else essentially. So that's how I got my role in the marketing agency, which was based in Chelsea at the time, called Gyro, which is an integrated agency where we work with lots of FMCG and retail brands. However, I always had something niggling in the back of my head that I still want to be involved in hospitality. And I saw an opportunity to go and work for the largest nightclub operator called Luminar Leisure at the time, who owned household brands such as the Oceana and Liquid brands. Ironically enough, that I would go to those brands as a student as well.
So how did you then how did you make that transition to Oceana? You said that you saw the opportunity. Did you
Yes.
get headhunted, or did you again try to stand out?
Yeah, I did get headhunted, but I saw the opportunity. And I think where I stood out was the fact that because I already had experience and had knowledge of the industry, me being a DJ, I think they kind of resonated with my experience. But I think also, there were lots of other people who were applying, had a lot more experience on paper. But I think sometimes, and certainly something I learned later on in life when I started to recruit and build our own team, experience is great, but passion And having the will and the fire in your belly is something you can't manufacture. You can't teach somebody that. And I think that's what I had versus some of the other candidates who had better experience than I did. But I think the fact that they saw that actually he really loves the industry and he's passionate about the industry. And that's why I was able to then join the business quite early on. And I was at Luminar Leisure for 5 years, launching the largest nightclub brand across the UK, Oceania. There were 3 venues at the time. We opened additional 10 up and down the country. So I'd be traveling quite a lot in key towns across the UK. We had 13 sites across the UK. And that was invaluable experience for me, working very, very close with the operators and helping them. And yeah, to be 25, working in that environment and that industry, I couldn't have asked for any more.
Sounds like a great job. But how did you then go from this to starting your own restaurant?
Yes, so I stayed at Luminar for 5 years, and then Luminar Leisure, the nightclub industry, was very much kind of wet led. So about 95% of the revenue was very much kind of drinks and wet led. So I wanted to get some more experience in food because I had a passion for food. And then from Luminar, I went on to work for a few other businesses, some pub companies, and a high street premium bar and restaurant chain called The Living Room across the UK as well. And I did that for about 3 years. So I felt I had good enough experience and well-rounded experience in the hospitality industry to kind of then roll the dice. So a good friend of mine who I went to university with, that we lived together, decided actually let's go and open our own brand. So 2015, myself and Vish, who's still a very good friend of mine now, almost like brothers, we launched a brand which was Pecking, which was all based around the rotisserie chicken, American burgers, cocktails. So almost bringing what happens in the West End of London, but out to the suburbs. So it becomes a lot more accessible. So think Nando's, but a more premium version of that. So we had our first 45 cover restaurant in Stanmore in northwest London. So if people know the London Underground, it's the last stop on the Jubilee line. And then 2.5 years later, we opened a second site at Barnet Football Club. And then we brought the chairman and the owner of Barnet Football Club, a guy called Tony Cleanthos, as a third partner in the business.
There's a great achievement at that age. How did you go about scaling this business within such short time? How did you go on to bring such an important person on board as a partner?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so I think early on for me, it was really to understand like the operational side of the business, because prior to that, I was very much a marketeer, head office. Yes, I got involved in some more operational work in the previous businesses that I worked for. But however, this was very much kind of hands-on and really understanding the business. I had to understand the back of house, front of house, how to make food, how to make drinks. And very quickly, I found out that no one's going to treat that business like you're going to treat that business very, very quickly. And it's very much based on people, and hospitality is a people business. So for me, it was a good learning curve. I was working 24/7. I went all in on the business. So when I launched the first restaurants in Stanmore, I put the house on rent. My wife and I moved into my dad's house to keep our costs as low as possible. My son had also been born when I launched the first restaurant. So for the first 3 years, I never saw him grow up, which was unfortunate. But I learned a huge amount during that period. And it just so happened that we had a number of regular customers, one of which stopped me one day and said, look, I really love what you're doing. I'd love to have your restaurant in my football club. And he gave me his business card and said, I'm the chairman and founder of Barnet FC. So literally within 3 months, we did a deal. Maybe my founder and I were almost like two kids in the toy shop, and we did a deal quite quickly. And then he became a third partner, and we opened a 100-cover restaurant overlooking the football pitch in the main stand of the Hive, which is the name of the Barnet Football Club stadium. And not only did we manage the restaurant, we then essentially became the F&B operators of the stadium. So all the kiosks around the stadium, we would also manage for home and away fans as well. So on a match day, we would do 300 or 400, 500 covers in the restaurant, but also we would have to then recruit a pool of 40 or 50 staff, additional staff, to manage all the individual kiosks as well.
What I really love about that is at times you take a stab in the dark and then opportunity finds you.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's when you least expect it as well. You never know what's going to happen. And I've always had a philosophy, never ever chase the money. Don't chase the cash. That's almost a byproduct. As long as you've got a great business, you work hard, or if you're working for somebody, work hard, be honest, and, things will start to happen basically, because trying to get as much experience under your belt is invaluable. And that just moment of luck or faith where Tony approached me and said, love what you're doing, was recognition and validation for what we were doing, but also the fact that sometimes you've got to be at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I love that. What about the funds to set up a physical business?
Yeah, it was hard. So a lot of help from family and friends. So I was fortunate my dad was able to help. My brother was also able to help as well. And then obviously having my co-founder was able to put some cash in as well. So it was our own cash. We never took any external investment. It was all completely bootstrapped, essentially, if you want to call it that. And that's how we started to trade. And we were quite lucky enough or fortunate enough in the first 6 to 12 months. We did really, really well, and obviously put some cash away for reserves for a rainy day as well. But essentially the cash was born out of my parents helping and some friends and family.
It's a controversial topic in terms of taking investment from parents, especially if it's not like they're trust fund wealthy, but they're working class and they want to help. How did you get comfortable taking money from the parents and your parents and brothers getting comfortable investing in you?
Yes, it's interesting actually. So I've probably been really lucky that my parents have been amazing, and I come from an Asian background. I'm Indian, and traditionally, like in Indian culture, and certainly like in career paths, a lot of the Asians have gone down the more traditional type of career, whether it be in finance or medicine. All of my cousins, all of my brothers, they're all in medicine and they're in finance. And I was almost like the black sheep of the family, but do what I love doing, which was hospitality. And I think my parents saw that from early on. One thing that my parents have always had is always believed in their sons, my brother and I, and always had that faith. And also having a great relationship with parents always helps as well. We're always open and honest as well. My dad was always open with us at a young age as well, telling us about when things were tough and when we had to claw back, or when actually it was doing well in life, and then we were able to go on holidays and whatever the case may be. And that's why I was also open and transparent as well when I had the opportunity to open the restaurant. And I asked my dad if he would help, and he didn't hesitate. And my brother didn't hesitate either, because of the bond that I think we had between all of us. But I also think the reason why their mindset might have been slightly differently was, unfortunately, prior to that, 5 years prior to that, my mum passed away. And I think their outlook on life had changed, and they almost felt like, you only live once. We kind of experienced it, and you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and you can't take the money with you when you're gone. So why not roll the dice? Why not? Let's have a go at it.
Sorry to hear that. You are quite vocal about how that experience shaped your life and what you're doing now. But then back to Pecking Order, you built this, achieved all these successes, but it didn't last long. What happened?
Yes. So we had the business in total for 4 years, but in the third year, Nando's opened 5 doors away from the first restaurant in Stanwell, which literally killed us overnight. So while we were making good cash margin and cash profit, we were either breaking even or we were losing cash. Initially, that Nando's was going to be at Carluccio's, would have been great because it would have brought more people into the area. The fact that it was a Nando's was a direct competition. Although we were a premium version of that, Nando's is an established brand, and we couldn't compete with their prices either. So that knocked us. But also the third partner, Tony Cleanthos, who then became obviously an investor in the business, what he promised he never delivered either. So the idea was that we would roll out the brand to 15, 20 sites, but actually he was only interested in his site in his football club. It also was a time where 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, I hadn't really seen my son. My co-founder had also got married during that period as well, and he wasn't spending a huge amount of time with his wife as well. Now my wife inherited the industry I was working in, so she understood the late nights and understood like the lifestyle, whereas my co-founder's wife, it was new to her. So the fact that she would come home from work, but he wouldn't come home till 11 or 12 o'clock at night was a complete shock to her. So it was a combination of factors. So then we decided to sell the business to Tony. It was probably one of the hardest decisions we had to make. But I think sometimes you've got to acknowledge that when to draw a line, and I don't see that as a failure by any means. We won some awards on the back of it. We had a great customer base, returning customer base, but I learned a huge amount, and I definitely was able to then take those learnings to my next step. But don't get me wrong, it was probably the hardest 4 years, and at the end of it I then had to get back on my own 2 feet again and start from scratch again, essentially.
It's you start, you gain experience, but then you have to let go. Just to round this up in terms of the exit to your third investor, I'm sure it didn't pay so much money for that, right?
No, yeah, we essentially came away like break even basically. So I didn't lose any cash, but I didn't make any cash, which you could see as a win, because I know there's a number of entrepreneurs and founders who lose a huge amount of cash when they exit or when they decide to leave.
Thanks. And then once you left that business, you talked about the void. Well, I've expected it to have been a relief, but yeah, once you're in that space, you leave it, it's also a shock. Tell us about what that was like once you left.
Yeah, it was probably the hardest and probably one of the darkest moments of my life, actually, because, you just come off this, 4 years journey back to square one. My priority was to get my family back into our own house. So slowly, I started to get some consultancy just to get some cash in the bank. I then got the family back into our own house again so we could stabilize the family. I was able to spend a bit of time with my son, who actually never knew his dad, and my wife. And then incrementally, I started to get a little bit more consultancy and just get some cash in the bank. But also one thing that I did, which I think kind of really truly revolutionized my outlook, was that I was never into fitness. I was never a gym goer, but somebody said, why didn't you go into the gym, just to kind of just to kind of take your mind off things really and give you a little bit of a focus. I joined a 6-month training program, which was 7 days a week in the gym, 4 or 5 days a week. It was very much targeted towards, the gym, but also what you ate as well. And I did that regimented for 6 or 7 months. On the back of it, I was completely shredded. My physique looked fantastic, but that was just a byproduct. What it did for me mentally was invaluable. It gave me focus, it gave me discipline, and it really kind of got me back on back on track really. And if it wasn't for that particular 6 or 7 months, I don't know where I'd be right now. But for me, that gave me hope, those 6 months, and the fact that I was able to come back home, have some really good people around me, family around me, which is fantastic, which then allowed me to move on. But those 6 or 7 months were probably the most crucial in my life.
I saw that picture, with you fully shredded, holding the chain. And I have to ask this question. Are the 6-pack still there?
So a lot of people ask that. So if I skate out of 100%, I'm probably about 70% there.
That is amazing.
It's not sustainable. I like to go out and I like to have nice food. And I'm not a drinker by any means. In fact, I drink non-alcoholic beers when I go out. But everyone now and again likes to drink. And I want to live my life. So yeah, it's about 70%, but I still keep a lot of those habits. I'm still in the gym early in the mornings.
You may not be surprised, realizing that the name of this podcast is 23 Mile. I'm into long distance running, and I picked up running when I was at the lowest in my life. Not to dissimilar, I had a terrible boss who just made life terrible for me. Picked up running and realized that, oh my God, this is freedom. So now I am obsessed with my identity as a runner, long distance running, pain, all those things. I take so many business lessons from that as well.
Sure.
So, for you, with a gym, with that fitness, what are the main business lessons you've taken from, like you said, that 6-7 month experience and then thereafter?
Sure. Yeah, I think it kind of taught me certainly kind of some of the key traits that I still live by today is never give up. Keep pushing, keep pushing the boundaries, and just be resilient, and I always say, I always like watching the Rocky films, and he always says his famous saying, there's always one more round, always one more round, so the fact that, if I want to do an extra rep or an extra 2 reps, go for it, if you don't, I guess it doesn't matter, but still have a go at it, and even in business, if you're not quite sure, just have the confidence and the belief that, why didn't you just have a go? You don't know what the outcome's going to be until you try. You almost have to, you have to be in it to win it. You've got to buy, you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket, So for me, had some really good similarities from that perspective.
There's this theme of transitions and pivots. How did you then get into the tech space?
So obviously I was consulting and I got approached by a headhunter one day and said there's a business out in Australia who has built a CRM marketing platform for hospitality. They've got about 80% of market share. They've tapped out the market and they're looking for somebody to launch it across Europe. Would you be interested? And I said, I'm not interested. Thank you. And I put the phone down. I've never been a techie. I never had a fascination of tech. The only piece of tech that I had was my laptop and my phone and my iPhone, and that was it. And I was not interested. So for the next 2 weeks, every other day, he would ring me and I said, I'm not interested. I'm not interested. And then I thought to myself, and then I spoke to my wife and she said, look, what have you got to lose by having a conversation? You know, and I said, you're right. I haven't got anything to lose. So I rang the headhunter up, a guy called David Kellum. I still remember his name. And, I said, look, okay, let me have a conversation with the with the founding, you know, the founding team. So they're obviously based in Australia. So early morning calls, late night calls. So cut long story short, I had 7 interviews with them, which included obviously online interviews, psychometric tests, role plays. And then the last, funny enough, the last interview, the founding team came over to the UK, the CEO, the chairman, the founding team came over to the UK and they interviewed the final 15 people. And it came down to the last 2, myself and somebody else. Now, if you look at my whole prior career, I'd never done like sales. I was never involved in tech. The other candidate had a great sales experience, had tech background as well, but never had any hospitality background, whereas I was hospitality through and through. I 2 weeks, you know, did the interviews. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from the headhunter saying, Dhilon, they would love you to join the business and, you know, become, you know, the managing director, CEO for Europe for the business. Which I was absolutely appreciated. And then when the founding team came over to the UK a few months later to obviously talk through the business and like my plan of how I think we can tackle the UK and European market, I asked them, you know, I didn't have any sales experience prior. I never had any tech experience prior. Why did you choose me versus the other person who on paper had, you know, a really credible candidate with sales and tech experience? He said, Dhilon, we did research on you like we did with all the other candidates, and we saw your training program that you did for those 6 months, and for us that was gold dust, because to have somebody on the other side of the world that, you know, is self-motivated, is a self-starter and will literally run the business without anyone having to be on there. What happened when I got offered the job, they sent me over to Melbourne. So I went over to Melbourne for 2 weeks, met the team, saw the tech, overwhelmed. It was an amazing experience. And then at the time I then asked them, there was obviously 2 of us in the running, you know, myself who had a huge amount of hospitality experience but non-existent in the tech space or sales space, where the other candidate had a wealth of sales and tech experience as well. And I asked them quite bluntly, why did you choose me? And they said that we obviously did a bit of research on all the candidates, but you in particular, what we found out about you was your 6 to 7 month training program that you did. And we saw what the outcome of that, and for us that was gold to us, because essentially having somebody on the other side of the world, you know, we needed someone that we can trust, somebody that's a self-starter, a self-motivator, you know, who's disciplined and focused. They're the traits that we could see that you had almost emulated doing that training program. For actually those traits we can't teach somebody, we can't tell somebody those traits. You know, we can teach somebody about tech, but we can't teach somebody about to go out and, you know, really roll up your sleeves and get in the trenches. And that's why they awarded me the opportunity to build a business for them.
That is amazing. So basically saying it wasn't really the hospitality experience, wasn't any of the skills, it wasn't founding a business, it was literally just the training. That's discipline of going from being in a bad place, going into the gym and transforming your body was what got you this job.
Basically, also having a good, like, I had a network in hospitality, but it was those traits basically where they felt that certainly when the business and the founders are down under on the other side of the world, 24 hours away, they needed someone that could be a self-starter, focused, disciplined. They didn't want to be a founding team that are overlooking, you know, somebody 24/7. They wanted someone that could just literally run with it without having to be told what to do. And I think that's what they felt. I had that skill set essentially.
I mean, I saw the post where you were celebrating the exit to the bigger company.
Yes.
And one of the team made that comment around, you said it, that they trusted you when you didn't have the sales experience. And they were also recognizing that, you know, the bet paid off. What happened in between? You scaled that business effectively as a startup from 0 to, was it over £1 million in under 2 years?
Yes.
This
So Yeah, which was amazing. So obviously, I went over to Melbourne. As soon as I came back from Melbourne and got some initial training experience in understanding the platform and the tech, I then rolled my sleeves up in the trenches and literally on my own. All I was given was a laptop. I wasn't given any budget for any advertising or marketing. We were completely unknown. The business was called Sprout CRM. And I literally got in the trenches and got to work and started to leverage the network that I had within hospitality. And for the first 3 months, it was tough because I was also going up against my incumbent, who are UK based, who had also been in the industry for 10 or 15 years. So we're almost like the new kids on the block. But for me, in hospitality, I've always learned it's always based on relationships and your network, and that's what I was able to leverage, because even though they're buying into the product, they were also buying into me as a person as well. And for the first 3 months, it was quite tough to really kind of get across, why this piece of tech is going to solve a particular brand's problems. But within like 3 or 4 months, we started to get some really good traction. And my first set of customers were the likes of like Shake Shack, Big Easy, Vapiano, Box Park, the Ivy Group. We had some really good household high street names. And then within the next 2.5 years, kind of grew the business, working with single site and multi-site operators in hospitality, working across restaurants, bars, clubs, hotels, nightclubs across the UK and the whole of Europe, but also expanding into the US, the UAE as well. So we had lots of presence, EMEA essentially, which is fantastic. I brought on another sales girl called Holly, who was fantastic, helping me up in the north. And we had an account manager to kind of really like service the customers, because for me, service was just as important, but more important than the product itself, just to make sure that, every single customer was treated like a VIP. And we ran that business for 2.5, 3 years, and then was able to generate over 100k MRR, which was fantastic from literally a zero, a starting standpoint, really.
I mean, this is amazing also because coming from a tech industry, selling tech products is really, really hard. And selling to big companies is also actually way harder. It's lucrative, but it's very hard. What are the what would you say the top 3 lessons in enterprise sales from your experience at Sprout?
Sure. I think you've got to understand the customer and their pain points and almost become the expert. And I was quite fortunate that because my product was a marketing CRM product, so it was very much kind of marketing led and targeting the marketing audience. So it was head of marketing directors, who was my core audience, who I was selling into. My background was always marketing. So essentially I was selling to an audience that I already had been. I'd been a marketer previously, so I was able to speak their language. Because I was able to speak their language, I understood their pain points, I understood what they were trying to achieve. So the conversation became a lot more easier. And then I became the expert, and almost as well as me providing a product and a platform, I was almost consulting. It was always a consultative approach to help them. And it wasn't a case of then implementing that product. My role and my team's role was to make sure that they got maximum use out of that product. So I learned a huge amount about tech, API, coding, documentation. It's quite a steep learning curve for me. Our product was a SaaS-based, subscription-based model, which worked extremely well. And I now understand the value of a subscription-based model and how powerful it can be. Incrementally, we would grow that year on year, as well. But I think they were buying into us, they were buying into the product, but also the fact, like post-service, how we were able to then make sure that we would have our monthly meetings with them, we would have our QBRs with them to make sure that they were maximizing the platform to really kind of achieve their goals and objectives.
That's amazing. Understand the customer. And then all this ended up well with the business Sprout being sold to Mr. Young.
Yes.
At the time of this exit, how big was the EMEA part that you led? How big was it as a percentage of the entire business?
Sure. So EMEA, we did over $1.5 million, which is what it was basically. The whole business sold for about 10 million. But that previous business in Australia had been operating for 50, you see, so whereas we were operating for 2.5, 3 years. And one of the core reasons why Misty acquired us was purely the fact that they were already established in Australia as well. They're a mobile ordering platform. So to expand their product suite and to create and make sure their existing customers are more stickier, they felt that a CRM product would almost complement the existing product, which absolutely it would do. But they wanted to crack the UK market and European market, and we already had an established base. So it was a good opportunity for them to come into the UK market and then cross-sell their product to our CRM customers, essentially. So they acquired us, which was bittersweet, really, for me and the team, because almost this was like my baby. It was my business, it was my baby, and the fact that it was then getting acquired was, I was proud of the fact that you got it to a stage that it was able to be acquired. But I do miss it now and again that it was our baby, it was our own business, and obviously things changed slightly. But then we then moved across and integrated with the Mr. Yum teams on the back of them just raising $60 million.
And then from your experience with that acquisition, what would you tell founders and entrepreneurs who are preparing their businesses for exit? What's the top lesson there?
I think just make sure that from day one, really, just make sure that you've got everything in order. So make sure your financials are in order. Make sure you know your numbers. Make sure you know your margins. Make sure, we obviously used HubSpot to manage a kind of our funnel, as well. So just make sure that you've got everything pinpoint and you're documenting everything as well. So when you're starting to have conversations with potential acquirers, they know you as the expert, and understand the business inside out, because even though they're buying the business, they're buying you as well, because naturally they're going to expect you and the management team to come across for a certain period of time and to get your full earn out, as well. So it's important that you come across and your team come across that you know what you're doing, and you don't get lackadaisical and you don't become complacent until it's signed, sealed, delivered, but also post acquisition as well. You want to help part of the integration process as well.
As being part of, from leading Sprout and then becoming part of Mr. Yum, when was it, what was the trigger for you that made you realize it's time to leave and do something else?
Yeah, so I wasn't looking to move on, if I'm perfectly honest with you, because I did enjoy it. I started to love tech and understand the value of tech and how important it is and how, it can play a role in people's lives, I wasn't particularly looking for any, or moving on. I'm sure I would have done eventually, but I wanted to just kind of like ride it out for a few more years. But it just so happened at that time, my 8-year-old son, just during, one day at home, he would always ask about his grandma, so my dad, would come home to our house on his own and my wife's parents would come together. So he always kind of started to realize, how come granddad's coming on his own? He's not got anyone with him, So as he got older, I think he started to understand, okay, he's on his own, but there must be a reason for that. And obviously I started to explain to your grandma passed away at a young age. So my mum was 50 with cancer when she passed. And of course I had some photos and I had some videos, and I had, of course, my own memories that I could share with him, but that was pretty much it. Also during lockdown, I started to listen to a lot of podcasts, and I've been, a huge avid podcast listener over the last 3 or 4 years now. And I started to listen to like the Stephen Bartlett's High Performance and, Fern Cotton, Davina McCall. So I started to listen to a lot of podcasts, and that got me thinking that as my son was talking, if my mum was still alive, when she was born in East Africa, came over to the UK, how could she have documented her life story, but in today's digital world? So that started to play in my mind, but full well know that I still had a full-time job working at Mr. Yum as well. But I started to develop the proposition and started to make some inroads and felt that it had a real purpose behind it. And where the real penny dropped was, obviously I knew nothing about this space. All I've known is hospitality and tech. So one day I decided to get my dad. I found a professional interviewer and I asked, would you interview my dad for 2 hours? So she interviewed my dad over the course of 2 hours online. I went onto Amazon. I found a podcast mic, a random podcast mic, and she interviewed my dad about his life story from literally the day he was born till present day. I was listening to it, a complete emotional wreck, as you can imagine. But then I got it edited and produced, and then I played it back to my son. And the look on his face when he started to learn about his grandma's story through his granddad was really where the penny dropped. And for the next 2 weeks, then he was obsessed with it. Before he went to bed, he would say, can I listen to Granddad's story? Can I listen to Granddad's story? And that's when I started to really feel, actually, there's a real mission behind this, that if I can help close the generational gap, because those precious stories and memories, are lost and are forgotten, but can I find a way to kind of capture those, but in today's digital world? And that's when I started. So I always knew when I was at Mr. Yum that I was going to then, at that point, move on. But the founders of Mr. Yum were fantastic, and the support I got was phenomenal. They were founders themselves, so they got it. So I was quite open and transparent with them that there is a business that I'm developing on the side. They said, You carry on doing what you're doing. Obviously, I had targets to hit at Mr. Yum, which I did as well. And I think sometimes when you're working on almost, if you want to call it a side hustle, you
Yes.
become a lot more conscious. Actually, you want to make sure that you hit your targets because you don't want to give your employer any excuse to come back and say, okay, the reason why you didn't hit this is because you've been working too much on your side hustle. So I think you become a lot more conscious and aware that actually you want to make sure you hit your targets. You don't want them to come back to you or give them any excuse. So, but they were phenomenal. They would allow me to use the Misty Arm offices on the weekends to develop my own business as well. So I was in a really fortunate position. So while I was developing it, I could still earn money and get paid by working at Misty Arm as well.
But I must say, I am a fan of side hustles and building on the side, but it's extremely difficult. But someone like you had 10, 15 years experience, you did the same thing in college, right? So
yes,
it wasn't difficult, probably wasn't difficult for you, but definitely it's something every single person can do. They just need to go about it the right way.
of
So,
course.
I mean, if you've kind of told the origin story of Sprout Locker, which is amazing. What's the elevator pitch for someone listening for the first time?
Storylocker is a platform that allows you to create your own personal podcast based on your life story to leave as a digital legacy for generations. So we match individuals, parents, grandparents with media trained professional interviewers from the BBC and ITV to tell their story, whether it's done remotely or in one of our studios. We'll then edit it and produce it. And then the output is you have your own branded locker, hence the name, which has got your artwork, your show notes, and your podcast with a private link, which you can only share with friends and family. So it's not for public consumption. It's only for you to share with whoever you want to share it with.
I love it. And how far have you gone now? You mentioned you started it as a side hustle. Where are you now on the journey?
Yes. So in September, I then exited the Misty Well, in fact, 12 months prior, Misty merged with another business called Me and You. So I then left the Me and You business in September last year to then focus on Story Locker full time. I still was aware that I didn't want to lose my relationships that I'd built in hospitality over the last 20 years. So I decided to become a non-exec for a couple of other businesses, which I did. So I consult for a couple of hospitality tech businesses, but then my main job now, if you want to call it, is obviously driving the Story Locker business. And up until now, we've had some great traction, great awareness, some great case studies and testimonials. I've got to a point where we've now got product market fit and now looking to scale the business.
So are you going to raise or have you raised any funding for Story Locker?
So up until now, I've not raised anything. I've completely bootstrapped. So essentially, the exit that I got from Misty I put that cash into the Story Locker business. And it's probably the first business that is the first business that I'm a sole founder. The previous businesses, I've had people around me or in the team. This was the first business that as a sole founder, and it's bloody hard. It's not easy. So I will be looking for investment, but more importantly, just some people that can help, and I can surround myself with from a strategic perspective as well.
Where do you see the business going, say, over 5 years? How big do you see this could be?
Yeah, I think the business could be global. I think the current proposition and the current product at the moment is scalable to a certain extent because it's very much kind of human led. However, there is an opportunity that I'm developing to create more of a scalable, entry level, slightly tech led product that I'm starting to develop as well, because my product is quite a premium led product. It's not a impulse purchase. It's quite a considered purchase. So it's not accessible for everyone, although we're still getting some really, really good traction. And if I left it as it was, it could be a great lifestyle business. And there's nothing wrong with having a good lifestyle business. But I think my mission is that I'm sure lots of people in my position have lost loved ones and wish they had the opportunity to capture their loved ones' stories. And if I can make it as accessible as possible, I'd love the opportunity to do that. And that's why I want to try and create more of an entry level. I don't like the word mass market, but more accessible product that can be scalable, that everyone can be a part of.
I mean, I'm middle-aged. My parents are in their 70s, so I can see a need for this. I can see how this business scales as you go. So I can't wait to see this grow, but the premium products are the more accessible ones. Moving on now, what would you say from your experience across all these different areas? What would you say is the one word that describes entrepreneurship?
I thought about this. Can I use 3 words?
Yes, go for it.
Yeah. I think the best 3 words is never give up. You know, I think they're the three words that I live and die by. I think it's every single business that I've been involved in, you're going to have peaks and troughs. You know, you're going to have great days, you're going to have bad days. You know, you just got to make sure you have more good days than bad days, but you just can't. I think when you've got a why, a really strong why, and you've got a really good mission and purpose behind it, you know, that drives you to not to give up. You know, I've launched Story Locker and we've got some really good traction, but don't get me wrong, I have days where I think, oh, I'm just going to give up. You know, I don't want, you know, but I don't. I keep going because I really believe I've got something truly special here, you know. But the last thing I want to do is if I did give up and my sons ask me, oh, Dad, why did Story Locker work? And I say, I gave up. I don't think that's a good answer. You know, yes, I can talk about all the other kind of cliche words, resilience and what, absolutely to work hard. I think they're a given. I think those go without saying. But I think more importantly, why business fails sometimes, where they might be so close. You know, there's an image where somebody's behind the rock. Just behind the rock is that pot of gold. But you don't know when you're going to reach that pot of gold. And that's why it's a case, the closer you get, the closer you're closer at winning, but you just don't know. And that's why you can't give up. And that's what keeps me hope and keeps me the faith that I've got, that I've got a good business that I don't ever, but every business that I've been involved in, I've always had that philosophy. Just don't give up.
I will push back slightly just because I want to learn more. I mean,
Please.
You've walked away from a business. I've walked away from a business. You talked about your fitness journey. I mean, I'm the same. But that never give up is something I mean, I love it. And I feel I should get like a plate there. But there are times where you just have to realize, okay, I've given my best. I need to let this go. How do you then draw the line between never give up, which I absolutely buy into, and there are just times where you say, okay, this isn't going to work. I'm going to walk away.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's when things are out of your control. You know? So I think when things are out of your control, then you have to draw a line. So when I had the restaurants, it was out of my control. What we were promised, it was never delivered, you know, unfortunately. So I think you got to take that with a balance, I think, to be honest, as well. But I think sometimes when it's out of your control, there's nothing you can do. At the moment, I could give up today if I wanted to, but that would be my choice. But I don't want, you know, so at the moment, I can control all the controllables. You know, I can't control what I can't control. You know, so I think coming back to your question, which is a very good question, I think when it's out of your control, then absolutely, you know, if you think, and if it also comes to a point where if it starts to affect you as a person, your family, mental health, that's, I think, when you definitely have to draw a line, because ultimately your health over everything comes first. If you haven't got your health, you haven't got anything else. So I think when things start to affect you mentally, and then also your loved ones around you, that's when I think actually then you need to maybe reconsider where you are.
I was going to add something when you started, but you touched on it. 100% when it affects your loved ones, then it's time, yes, you have to step back. For me, this happened when my wife called me and said, you haven't seen your parents in 5 years because you have invested so much in this business. No time off, no breaks, no holidays. You cannot continue like this.
Sure.
So you nailed it there. When it impacts third parties, your family, then you've done your best.
100%. I think, no regrets. But ultimately, the reason why we're doing it is for our families. You're doing this for my family. You know, I want to leave a legacy for my kids, and I'm fortunate enough that my wife, they've never been materialistic, basically. You know, and look, when any founder's got a family and going into business, it's a family affair. You know, you're all in the same boat. If I'm making sacrifices, they're making sacrifices. If I'm not going on holiday, they're not going on holiday. If I'm not going to fancy dinners, they're not going to fancy dinners. So everyone's in it together. When I sold out of the restaurant business and I launched this business, Story Locker, I consulted my wife because I had to make sure that she was on board as well. You know, I wanted to roll the dice again, but I had to make sure that she was bought in. And the only non-negotiable she had was that happy for you to roll the dice and happy for you to go again. It's just that, can we stay in our own house? You know, I don't want to pick up the kids and move out. Not that my dad and my wife had an amazing relationship, but can we stay in our own house? You know, the kids are settled in school and stuff. I said, absolutely, I can make that happen. And she said, fine, then you're good to go. But it's a partnership in itself. Let's have a really, really understanding partner if you want to go into entrepreneurship.
100%. If I didn't have an understanding wife as well, I wouldn't be going 5 years and just keep rolling the dice. I failed at one and I keep going again.
Of
So
course.
that is non-negotiable. We're lucky, and fingers crossed it all works out at the end.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dhilon. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise.
And I will be a fan following you. And
thank you very much. Really appreciate the conversation, Cody, and really appreciate you having me on. It means a lot.